Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are. If you're watching this right now, my name is Andrew Corner. This is Blindspot Corner. And I had put on my Facebook that I was going to go streaming shortly. And as always seems to be the case, whenever I start to do these streams, or at least get set up to do them, or wherever, um, something happened, and I can't. My camera got configured wrong. Hang on a second. Okay. Okay. So now I've posted on my Facebook, the place where I go for all my informations. And yeah, no, my wife took the kids out, and I didn't know they were going, of course, because I'm so absorbed and wrapped up in what's happening and trying to understand it myself that she says stuff, and I suppose I kind of passively listen. So, I'm guilty of doing that. In any case, I got to get this done before she gets home in probably the next hour. So what do I want to get done? Well, I wanted to talk to whoever today. Really, I just haven't done a stream since the 21st of January. I've done some cutting up of other streams that I've done, and I've done some production stuff, but I haven't really done a live stream for 20 days now. That's actually seems like a long time, but that's how long it's been, and I don't have a regular schedule, even though I've made many promises to come on and do many things, and life gets in the way, unfortunately. And as much as I would like to be on this tight and fast and hard schedule, things are hard these days, I think, for everyone. And we're all just trying to figure things out as we go. And there's also stressors on the home front, one of which I made explicit this morning on my Facebook. And I do that because I'm trying to appeal not just to people that agree with me, but to people that don't agree with me. I'm trying to get them to understand what I'm seeing, why I am seeing it, and why it's so hard to get through to people that have chosen to believe that everything that is happening right now is happening for purely benevolent reasons. And what the way that I see it, I don't see it as benevolent or malevolent. I see it as just wrong. Like, it's just wrong. We've lived our lives according to one kind of ethos for a long time, at least in the West, and we're changing everything about that winning formula. And we've done that by attacking its roots, downplaying the importance of its history, forgetting about the lessons that we learned, and basically, theorizing about all these other reasons that people act the way that they do, and really that's an issue that happens in academia, where these people just go and, they live in this massive echo chamber, and they talk to each other, and it never occurs to them the things that they do. Like, when they're going to impose something like this, obviously the schools are protected, and government actors are protected, and people in public health are protected. Their jobs are all just getting more exciting, really, as this goes on. And it's just work for them to do. I don't think teachers on the grade school level or high school level are appreciating the way that this is going down. But I think that they agree with the general thrust of the way that it's happening, because there's so many things that make people orient themselves in a direction, a belief system that reinforces what they think, and then what they thereby teach to our children. And I think that's a lot of what's going on right now. I don't know if I'm making sense to a lot of people, or even to myself for that matter. But the point is this. Look, I put this together yesterday morning because Miss Davila came out and gave us some instructions, and let's just hear what they were. I'm going to play it with you. It's only at 17 views. I'm really trying to get my stuff out there, and I've posted it in a number of different places, and I'm trying to get some traction, but it's just not happening. And that it's frustrating, and it's difficult for me. I feel like I read a lot of posts on Facebook, and the vast majority don't even get acknowledged, which is interesting. I wonder if Facebook is throttling my feed on my Facebook because I'm Am I supposed to stop saying Facebook? Do I get censored by the algorithms if I just say Facebook? I mean, the level of craziness that we're living in right now, the times that we're living in right now, they're just, it's off the charts wild. But so let's just go ahead and, the point is that I feel like a lot of the things that I'm doing and saying are being ignored. In fact, even in my own home. And I felt so compelled that is true. I feel like that's so true that I felt compelled to actually write something about it on my Facebook this morning and post it out there for others to read, just to see if they could identify with the way that I'm thinking and feeling about all of this. Actually, my friend Erica put one of the most insightful posts on my post that I think is very explanatory of the way that people are feeling about this in their own lives, and so the contrast between what people are doing in their own lives and what I'm doing in my life is, I don't have a job. I think that people would be kind of doing these things and thinking about these things if they could, but a lot of people just, they're in such a situation that they're just trying to figure out how to make things work. As am I. I'm trying to see where the future is supposed to go with all this stuff, but they seem unconcerned with explaining to us how this is all supposed to play out. I mean, public health seems quite happy to shut down businesses and destroy revenue streams and destroy local economies if it gets what they think, in my opinion, and my opinion is based off of what I hear them say, what they think are the most pressing issues for society today, which are inequality, racism, and vaccine hesitancy. In a way that almost doesn't sound like it makes sense to have that go together, but then you have to understand the kind of schooling that these people are steeped in, which just kind of, it attaches all these things together. It's like this amalgamation of racism being the white supremacy that built the West, and capitalism had slaves, and then the slaves have these legacies, and the legacies are the reason for social disparities, and also men oppress women, and that's the reason for disparities in pay that are largely produced from materials that, if you look at it under any scrutiny, don't stand up. So you ask yourself why these people at the top kind of say these things, and then you realize it's always just about power. It's just about power. It's about telling people things that they want to believe. It's about giving people a victimology that they want to believe, because it takes all the blame off of them. So almost everything that's happening these days is basically taking the blame off of everyday people and their everyday lives. And what happens when you take the blame off of everybody's plate? Well, then you offer them your solution to fix it, right? You offer them Agenda 2030, and you're like, this is going to fix all of the problems, and you don't even have to explain it, because it sounds right? It's cloaked in that kind of language of social justice and goodness, and, in my opinion, pathological altruism. But it's also, you take that and you combine it with the fact that corporations as a whole can act psychotic in ways, and I've posted on that before, the psychopathy of large corporations and the way that they act. So what do we do about psychopaths? They don't actually have empathy. They say everything that people want to hear. They learn how to play people and to trick people and persuade them to go along with what they want done. But there is no real empathy. It's just the illusion. It's the what's the word I want to look for? I mean, illusion is a good one. It's an illusion. There's so many illusions happening right now, like the illusion that vaccines have given health to people as opposed to proper sanitation and irrigation and healthier food and happier times and more fulfillment in life. The idea that was only given to us with vaccines it's just so insane. It's amazing that I have to say it, and yet I do every single day. So there's two different ways to look at it. There's the psychopathic corporate way to look at it, which is to say that this is obviously all because of vaccines, and then they built these industries around that basically support that information because it's advertising, it's PR for their products. And of course they ignore any concerns that people might have about it, and they can also, kind of fudge the data a little bit because they do the studies, they self-fund the studies that they submit for approval to the FDA or whoever. And, they get to control all those parameters. So basically, it's like, if you were to ask Coke if Coke was better than Pepsi, obviously Coke would say, yeah, Coke is better than Pepsi. But, they'd come up with all kinds of creative ways to tell you what makes Coke preferable. But is it really preferable? I mean, I don't know. If you ask the people at Pepsi, they would say differently. Now, the difference here is that the people at Coke have gotten so big that they have gotten to a point where they've done what's called regulatory capture, where they have created a revolving door in the same way that banking has and a lot of different areas of politics have, where they kind of go in and out of the regulatory agencies that are supposed to be the watchdogs, making sure that these guys are not up to doing something that is, selling us these kind of false promises. Like, I don't know, vaccines healed the entire world. It's not true. I mean, it's not true. You try to talk to people about it, and you say, hey, have you read this book? And they just go, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. And, well, did you read the book? No, I didn't read the book. Well, everybody assumes these experts are out there looking out for them, as opposed to these experts are only experts because they've been trained to do the job that the pharmaceutical companies want them to do when they funded the organizations, the schools, the various programs to do what they want out of it. Like, they throw money into it because it gives them something back. There's a benefit from it. And they can tell you that the benefit is that it's saved all these people. But it doesn't actually seem to again, like everything else, it doesn't stand up to scrutiny. It's just one of those things that gets said, like the pay gap. When you examine it and do like-for-like comparison, which, by the way, we've never been allowed to do until recently, which I'm not going to get into today, but look up James Lyons Weiler. I keep saying this stuff because it shows that there is a myth, okay? We live under these myths in society. And only because we strongly believe in these myths, or these singular ways to look at things, we are somehow now all going to agree that we need to change all of society based on a handful of myths. Now, these are myths that are perpetuated by some very powerful and influential people. Hence, regulatory capture. But they're still myths. There's very little truth to a lot of this stuff. And there's actually a lot of very powerful people and institutions that would be under threat if it was shown to be a myth. Like, a lot of people would lose jobs. A lot of people would lose money. It might be the kind of thing that actually destroyed an economy. However, ultimately, it would be a good thing. It would be a good thing to expose these myths, right? We need to talk about reality more and have discussions about reality more and not leave it up to experts to have discussions about reality on our behalf. We all need to kind of take part in this thing. And so if this year is showing us anything, it's showing us that we all need to take more part in what's happening out there, and we cannot just leave ourselves out of it and leave it up to these experts to tell us how everything is supposed to be from now on, because this is the world that they want for us from now on. This is not living. What they're doing right now, what they're doing to people, is not living. Now, I'll say this, as I said it a million times. The caveat is that the way we were living our lives even before this had its problems. It wasn't ideal. There is no ideal world. There is no utopia. It was the best possible thing that we had come up with, this idea of capitalism and laws that regulate the people in power and what they're allowed to do to what we want for the world, which is more free people, because we know that free people can get along better. We know that they can, we know that it creates prosperity to have free people. And I highly recommend. I was just listening to a podcast by one of the most recent podcasts by Jordan Peterson. Thank goodness he's back on the scene, and he is having a podcast with a fellow named Matt Ridley about rational optimism. And I really need people to kind of understand that this is about changing the way that we understand human life and how it should be governed. And so there's financial interests behind this that are acting in a psychopathic corporate type of way. A like when you look into ESGs, environmental and social governance bonds. These are people that are investing money into companies that tick all the right boxes, and they're basically policing people to do all the things that the social justice orthodoxy wants them to do. And they make all kinds of really good arguments for why that should be the case, but ultimately, it also serves some very powerful interests to push this kind of narrative. And they have their reasons, and those reasons, again, are based on myths, right? Vaccines saved lives. So we need to make sure that everybody gets a vaccine, mandate vaccines. When we do that, when we stop having the conversation and we've decided that we are so correct that we're going to create a scenario where we're going to the end goal of this is to mandate vaccines for all people, all vaccines. I'm telling you right now, that's what this has been about from the start. That's what the UN was concerned about in like last year, late 2019. They were all getting together talking about the fact that, well, you know, there's this big problem. We're going to have a lot of trouble with Agenda 2030 because people don't want the vaccines. There's a real problem. The real problem that they need to solve, and the problem that their schooling programs and these masters of health and these people, they all believe it. Why do they believe it? Because they're financially incentivized to believe it. Okay? They are financially incentivized to believe it. Because you can make money by selling the myth. You can make money by being a race baiter that sells the myth of all these increasing race relation problems. And it's never been more obvious than what's going on in the United States right now. I mean, it's mind-blowing the kind of stuff that's going on. This stuff that's coming out of media, who you think are supposed to be these responsible people, but they're maniacs. I mean, the stuff that they're saying is just, it's over-the-top role-playing action stuff. And again, it's steeped in this ideology that comes out of academic circles. That is, a lot of stuff gets funded to go a certain way by certain people. And that is much more attributable to pathological altruism than some nefarious plot. But is that to say that there are no nefarious plots? I don't know. There's a lot of weird stuff that go. Have you ever looked up the Georgia Guidestones? I mean, that's a weird thing, isn't it? Let's do it right now. See, this is... I always start these things and I have a direction I want to go in. And then I start talking. And I go in a completely different direction, so I'm not even prepared. That's okay. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to cut the good bits out of this, and I'll put that up because people don't want to listen to me ramble, I suppose. What is this? So, let me... No. Okay, where's the limits? The limits right there. This is really interesting to know. So people, they're all concerned about, people don't believe in the conspiracy theories, right? They're always talking about we're the only people that have authority to tell you what's going on. Don't believe in the conspiracy theories. Let me give you one of the best ones, okay? Never mind the banking system. Never mind all the conspiracy theories surrounding health in general. Never mind the conspiracy theories surrounding cancer, although there's some really interesting ones there that I myself have investigated when my father got sick and recently 5 years ago passed from cancer. That's another reason that I've read stuff like The Secret History of the War on Cancer and Cancergate and stuff, and you realize that those institutions too have been corrupted by the attempt to raise money for these issues that they start off as good. It's a good idea to raise money for cancer research because so many people have cancer. But then you read these books and they talk about the fact that, we know it's related to workplace and environment and health and all that kind of stuff. And the ways to deal with that stuff are not spending more money on raising, which the vast majority of money that goes into cancer research gets handed out to the people that work on the foundations and the boards that do cancer research. the point is that a very minimal amount of money actually goes to the research itself, because the research is always on treatments and other research that shows you that it's this environmental issue. Well, unfortunately, that gets used against us again as well. You know, there's no easy answers to this stuff. The point is that it's just big business now. It's big business to care for people and give them cancer treatments. And they're not always the best decisions. They are just the easiest ones to control the stream of money that comes back on the return on investment. In the same way that vaccines are the best return on investment. If you say to people, exercise more, get more fresh air, spend more time with your family, try to smile a little more, don't stress as much, get your basic vitamins and supplementation. Vitamin D seems to be huge, vitamin C. Get these things, make sure that you're properly regulated, and try to have healthy food. That doesn't work for anybody that's trying to sell you a cure. Just so you know. For anybody that's trying to tell you that vaccines are the cure to everything, and that it's not actually prosperity that made, you know, sickness instances and people that actually died from vaccinations, or excuse me, vaccine preventable diseases, they're I'm getting way off the beaten path here. You know, I tried to come on and I tried to say before. By the way, so I'm looking at the screen now and I'm looking over this way, and this is what I started to say when I started up, and I all flustered, as I do when I have to rush into doing this stuff and doing these podcasts, because I only knew at the last minute that my wife was going out, and I lose track of time, obviously, all day, every day. But it's not for lack of trying to know what's going on or trying to be productive. I do so much work that never actually gets out there. It's kind of unbelievable. And I need to get better at organizing my time, I suppose. But yeah, when I look this way, normally I'm able to flip around the screen for my camera, but somehow it got installed as a different camera and it doesn't have the option. It's a whole thing. So every time I try to set these things up, something frustrates me. I can't get it done exactly the way that I want to. There's been all kinds of issues with just like my picture would freeze and all. Just every time there's something, and it's just these little things that are enough to irritate us. And I want you to consider that for a second when we talk about people in public health. People in public health that are coming out and they're trying to deal with this thing, and they're getting these numbers of, you know, the cases. And look, I think that at the top, they know that this is not about a pandemic. They, again, and I started saying that before, the people that are putting this through are doing it because they believe vaccine hesitancy, climate change, and racism are three of the biggest things that we need to deal with. And they're all related to capitalism. They want to replace what they see as the single biggest problem for them implementing their plans, which is people's ability to be independent and free from government coercion. And so people in public health, they just see this as a means to an end, right? They can talk about this kind of stuff and they're just following the rules, right? The guidance that comes down from the WHO when the WHO says, hey, reduce your cycle count because we're getting too many issues with wrong tests here. And then they do that, and then they say, oh, there's this strain that's, oh, no, there's a new Brazilian strain, and the Brazilian strain is more infectious, and we need to worry about this more infectious Brazilian strain. And they're like, we identified one in Toronto. And so if you identified one from Toronto and it's more infectious than the most infectious disease that we've ever seen, the one that's so infectious, we all need to wear face masks and social distance, and we can't go to our favorite restaurants anymore. That one, the most dangerous virus in the world that also seems to be quite in line with seasonal illnesses, except for a little bump that could be attributed to some malfeasance, unfortunately, on the level of actual application of protocols. You know, it's so crazy to suggest that there would be one in Toronto and this super infectious thing. There's only one, though. We only identified one, but it's super infectious in Brazil. We need to lock you down. At the end of the day, it's always the same thing. We need to lock you down. Because they want to lock you down, because this isn't about the virus. It's not about the virus. I'm sorry, it's not about the virus. It's about getting you to take vaccines so they can get Agenda 2030 in place to protect us all from climate change, and they don't want to talk about it anymore. They don't want to have the discussion, and it also suits a lot of financial interests to do it exactly this way that may or may not have been threatened if James Lyons Weiler and his study had actually made a lot of mainstream noise, which it didn't, completely ignored. Nobody's ever going to talk to this guy, even though he just did what we were told could never be done, was a vaccinated versus unvaccinated study. And I posted about it so many times because people need to understand, okay? If it were true that the entire premise for vaccines is disproven, or at least made to be questionable, because, as it turns out, kids are healthier when they don't get the battery of vaccines that we give to all the children nowadays. And if that was to be questioned, even for a second, could you imagine the lawsuits? I mean, right now they are free from any litigation because of a deal that was struck, the act in 1986, I think. They're free from any liability, and they made this emergency measure that made them free from any liability for the SARS-CoV-2 vaccinations as well, that aren't even vaccinations, they're gene therapy. So in every single way that we look at this, it is tortured logic. But unless you actually know some of the details behind it, you're like, oh my God, I don't even know what's happening. They're just telling me all this scary stuff. I might as well believe it and just go along to get along. I might as well just bury my head in the sand. And that's a totally reasonable thing for people to do. That's a totally rational thing for people to do. That's the thing. I don't blame people for doing what they're doing, but I do hold the people at public health in contempt for lying. And they are lying. Not only are they lying, they're breaking the law. The government is lying to us. They're breaking the law. Laws that were put into place to protect us from exactly this kind of thing. And they have all their justifications for it. Okay? You hear about it every day. It's racism. It's climate change. It's vaccine hesitancy. This is what... Vaccines save the planet. Unquestionable. We need to find a way to get everybody to take them. Plus, we can only get Agenda 2030 in place if we get them to take all the vaccines. Plus, there's all kinds of stuff going on, like the ESGs underneath that people have been investing a lot of money into. And the pièce de résistance of this entire thing is that, you see, we were not going to be useful to them anymore. So they're going to focus their energies on developing Africa and whatever countries are still the developing countries. They're going to put all their focus on building that up. And then they're just going to make excuses after the fact for all the things that they've done. And they're going to make rules, and they're going to make censorship, and they're coming out, and I don't even blame a guy like Bill Blair, who I don't particularly like because he had that heavy-handed response. I was at the G10, the G8? Was it the G8 or the G10? I don't remember. I think it was the G8. This guy doesn't even know what he's talking about. Look, I know what I'm talking about. I was there. I was at the protest, basically for this Davos-style crowd, at least a handful of the people from the Davos crowd. They were in Toronto. Okay, in 2010, I was there. I covered the protests. I, at that time, remarked about the fact that the way that the police were handling the situation, when there was just people, most people were just walking around. But yeah, there were some troublemakers breaking up pieces of concrete to throw rocks and stuff like that. And you know what? I am for 100% non-violent non-compliance. That is like, it has to be the only way. Like, just go about your regular lives. But it has to be all of us doing what we want to do in our regular lives. It has to be all of us. And the partners from the Great Reset have to be brought around to be thinking correctly. But, you know... The sad part about all this is it's probably just... It's too well done. I mean, this whole thing is being too well orchestrated. It's been too well planned for that I don't know If people are going to get themselves educated enough to be able to fight back against it. So I'm doing what little part I can, because at least I understand a lot of these different aspects. I don't claim to be an expert in anything. I am a layman in most things. But I also don't think I'm an idiot. And I can tell when these people are using this kind of reasoning for a goal, because it's just been a personal interest of mine. Anyways, I'm always talking about myself. That's a problem. Maybe I'm just a narcissist, right? Okay, so this was from... I don't want to talk about this, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. Look, you want to understand why people are acting irrationally. And meanwhile, stuff like this exists in the world. What are they supposed to think? I want you to understand what the Georgia Guidestones are. And who built them. It was a guy that just showed up under a fake name. This article is excellent. I suggest you go in and read it. I posted it a couple weeks ago. It describes this situation, and it's a crazy situation out of a Cloak and Dagger magazine. I mean, it's wild. Some guy shows up with, like, these directions to build this thing that seemed completely crazy. The guy that he originally goes to plays him off like he's, like, a weirdo, sends him to the town banker or whatever. The town banker vets this guy, realizes he's dead serious about what he wants, and he knows the cost. Like, the cost of this... of the Georgia Guidestones in today's dollars, I put up a post about it when I did talk about this. It's enough to buy like a really comfortable house and put 50 of your children through university and college and still live a pretty comfortable life with vacations and boats. Like, the amount of money that this guy dropped on this stuff for that time was obscene. Who does that? Who has the means to do something like that? I'm not trying to drag up any conspiracies other than the fact that this is real. It's not a fake thing. It's a real thing. And the guy that showed up and paid for it was a real guy. He used real money that most people do not have access to throughout their entire lifetimes. And this guy is just like, here you go, here's the money. By the way, it's coming in from all over the country. You gotta read this article. So there you go. Just look it up. American Stonehenge, monumental instructions for the post-apocalypse. So the fact that this exists, of course, makes people crazy. And maybe that's the point. Who knows? I have gone into great length to talk about the fact that there's books like this, which I'm using as a stand, Rockefeller Medicine Men and Capitalism in America, written by a Marxist, and he talks about how they basically usurped the entire medical field. They put in allopathic medicine and poo-pooed anything that did not live up to their standards, which, of course, the doctors were all for, because it raised their influence on society. They weren't like these gods that they are today, that everybody bows down to. Oh, did a doctor say that? Oh, shit, we better do it. Oh, don't think. Just do what he says. So their prestige was raised. Their incomes were raised. And look, these guys, Rockefellers and Carnegies, they walked in and they handed tons of money to hospitals to buy equipment that regular people would never be able to afford. And so you have to ask yourself, why did they do that? And this guy says, it's because capitalism is bad. But that's not capitalism in the classic sense. That's not capitalism in the Adam Smith sense. That's not the free exchange of people and free from government coercion in their daily lives to be able to go about and do the things that they're doing. Although it has apparently manifested in exactly that. So I don't know. Maybe he's right. Maybe Marxism is right because of this one book. No, that's not the way that it works. And there's always, you need to have a nuanced point of view on anything. Was Marx right about something? Sure. Absolutely. I read the Communist Manifesto. Right? Like, I was all into that shit a decade ago. I get what it is. I understand lefty perspectives. Which is why I kind of understand the people that are doing what they're doing. I understand where they're coming from. I get it. I get wanting to protect people. I get the inclination of people in public health wanting to help people. The question is, are they being straightforward and honest about who it is they want to help and how? I don't think so. I don't think so. But I could see, if you were an ideologue and you truly believed the things that you don't really spend that much time investigating yourself, you would just go along to get along, and the right people would end up in the right positions to allow this thing to happen exactly the way that it's happening right now. And it's not about a virus. It's just not. Although I do have a really interesting article that I would like to discuss with you. Let me get through it. I'm not going to go through this. I'm not going to go through it today. Let me just do, again, the opener that this little compilation that I did. Here we go.
We are in a transition from one pandemic to another. A transition to a new pandemic. We are in a position of great uncertainty with respect to variants.
I know they cut it there. But that's so funny. And I really only have about... Shoot, what time is it? See? I'm such a rambler. It's 2:20. I only have about half an hour to do this. Shit. Okay. From
transition
one pandemic
to a new pandemic. We are in a position of great uncertainty with respect to variants.
The position of great uncertainty is being promoted by you. Do you realize that? Again, the Brazilian strain or whatever UK strain, they're so dangerous. They're even more dangerous. What are they going to make us do that's more that is more oppressive than wear a thing on our face all the time, at all times, wherever we go, what do we do? We can't see our family. I can't hug my mother. What is more oppressive than that? Is it possible that they could come up with an even more oppressive way to be handling this pandemic response that is so not about a pandemic? Because if it was, mentioning the fact that there was these new strains that we need to test to find that apparently are even more scary than the last one would already be everywhere. Would they not already be everywhere? If this one got everywhere and we started to do the measures in, like, I don't know, when did they start? They basically locked everything down in March. And by that time, it was already everywhere, right? It was already everywhere. No, it's just because we were being laxed. Look, everything they say doesn't make sense because unless you understand what they actually are doing, it doesn't make sense. It's not supposed to. They are using behavioral programming to get us to change our ways because that's what Agenda 2030 is. It's all about changing our ways and our lives and controlling us from the top down. And the universal basic income thing was baked into the cake. It's part of the deal. Do you know what else is part of the deal? Because I know when I say read it, very few people actually go read it. No more smoking. No more drinking. No more meat. They want you to have bug sandwiches. I'm not saying that. I'm just telling you that they're saying that. And that's what she doesn't say when she comes out and she tells you, we're really concerned about all these new strains that are even more deadly than the last one that wasn't deadly at all. This is insane. But I will say one thing that I want to get to. Okay. Oh God. See, I'm really running out of time. Look, I'm you know, people, if you watch this, I hope you can feel my pain because this is painful. I don't even want, I know that's a lie. I do like having conversations. I try to have conversations. I try to educate myself. I try to understand things that most people don't try to understand. Okay? If that makes me a conspiracy theorist to read things and, you know, think about things in a way where I actually, you know, I just read what's there and I say, yeah, that sounds silly, or yeah, that sounds buyable. I'll buy that. And then you look into more and more details, and the more details you gather, you can actually kind of flesh out and define these pictures and these things. Put them into conceptualization. And it makes sense. It makes sense that what they're doing, based on what was coming down the pike, it makes sense that what they're doing is exactly what they wanted to do. Does it have to be more complicated than that? I mean, when they make it more complicated, yes, I suppose. But again, these are people that have been put into positions and jobs where their entire position and job is to do exactly what they're doing. Should we be surprised that that's what they're doing? In fact, let me go. So this guy, who is this guy? This guy, so this is the ugly, quote, ugly third wave of COVID-19 around April. Inevitable for Ontario experts. Expert says. I'm sure this guy is questioning the narrative. Okay, so look, Colin Furness. The third wave is inevitable, said Colin Furness, an expert in infectious disease epidemiology from the University of Toronto, told CTV News. And I think the third wave is the big one for us. How many times have they been telling us the big wave? It's the big one's just around the corner. Now, that's what he's been trained to say. That is what he does. He is a communicator that uses language and rhetoric to convince you that what he and his friends and his colleagues want is also what you want. And they want Agenda 2030. They want to deal with the vaccine hesitancy issue. It's what they go to school to learn how to talk to you about. That's what they get taught in school. They don't get taught all the different ways to think about it. They don't read Dissolving Illusions. They don't read The Age of Autism. They don't read that stuff. They don't listen to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. They don't listen to Del Bigtree. All they do is try to figure out how they can win. That's what they go to school for. To get better at winning. To do the job that they're hired to do. Does it have to be more complicated than that? I mean, it is. But if you get hired to do, you get trained to do a job where your job is to deal with vaccine hesitancy, because that's the worst thing that could ever happen, because you believe this myth that vaccines helped everybody and saved the entire world from infectious disease, which is a myth. It's a myth. I have... But it's a myth that most people don't know very much about. Okay? That's the problem. Most people don't read the books. Those guys don't read the books. They just go, oh, we've done a study, and the study said that there's no correlation between autism and mercury or autism and vaccines. We know it. We did it. We took the MMR and we used it against the placebo and we looked at the details. We know because the pharmaceutical companies told us. They did the study for us, of course, because they have access to all of the materials and all of the drugs. And so they pay for this stuff. And then they come away and they go, oh, no, it's all good. We looked at it. It's all good. Is it true? Why does a movie like Vaxxed come out where the guy is a whistleblower for the CDC saying that it isn't true? And then they just, well, he's an idiot too. And so now they're worried. They need to censor opinions. Facebook is telling us they literally need to censor opinions of people that believe these conspiracy theories. That is paid for advertising. It's not science. It's paid for advertising. And the school that they go to, the programs they go to, focus exclusively on convincing you to believe them. They are not concerned with actually having debates. They are not concerned with actually looking at the details. Not part of the curriculum. The curriculum is to convince you to take the vaccines. Why is this so complicated? So who's that guy? Oh my gosh. So who's that guy? Man, I post a lot of shit on Facebook. Who's that guy? And like, you know, when you see the way that all of this stuff is related, it's just like you can't not see it again. Who is Colin Furness? What are his professional interests? The effectiveness of information systems for knowledge work, information and knowledge management, health behavior change, infection control, epidemiology, COVID-19 pandemic management in Canada. This guy is part of the team that's working towards Agenda 2030. And when I looked at him, he's literally... So they get these experts on whose job it is to convince you that the vaccines are the most important thing that you might ever need to do in your entire life. And they go, look, this guy said it. He's an expert. Is he? He's a paid promotional advertiser. That's what he is. It's glorified. Right? It's vetted by the same people that created the vetting system in order to get their ideas popularized. They bought it. They bought the influence. That's not the only book that talks about stuff like that. There's a million of them. And do you know what they want to do to books that go against their narrative? They want to censor them. They want to make it so that you can't even get those books. Because they don't want to argue about it anymore. Okay, so let me just do a couple more things. And all these people do. When you look into all these people, and it's always the same thing. Masters of Public Health. You look at the Masters of Public Health program from Harvard. Excuse me. I did this the other day. Okay. The Harvard Chan School Master Public Health degree will provide you with the breadth of knowledge, subject-specific expertise, specialized skills, and powerful global network you need to forge the career you want in public health. Whether you are a medical doctor, an established public health professional, or new to the field of public health, flexible degree formats and an array of options for specific fields of study will provide you the right mix of grounding in the core disciplines and public health and specialized focus to meet your individual goals. So what's the next line? Graduates have achieved some remarkable things. They have led global efforts to eradicate diseases such as smallpox and guinea worm disease. I don't know that much about guinea worm disease, but it sounds like not an infectious thing so much as a communicable issue. An issue of, I don't know, cleanliness. My family's home, so I'm going to cut this off soon. Look, okay. I went into this, I didn't want to do this on the fly. The point is they basically teach you how to get people to accept vaccines because they're an unalloyed good. It's not even debatable. They don't want to debate it. So go check out my video, please. It's only got 17 views. Do you want freedom from tyranny or not? Even, subscribe to my YouTube page. That would be awesome. I'm just trying to have a conversation here. And I get that I'm getting a little wound up when I go off about what these people's job is. But that is what they learn to do. That is their job. Just like when you have Jen Psaki come out and, shill for Joe Biden. Do you think she believes any of that stuff? She says no. She's got it on paperwork. She's just reading the stock response. There's not a lot of critical thinking going into that. Anyway, so let me just read this thing here. Oh, this is interesting. Make sure you go check this out. COVID-19 Behind the PCR Curtain by Dr. Sam Bailey. Because this is something that I think people don't understand about the PCR test.
Let's get into COVID-19. The mainstream theory is that a new virus called SARS-CoV-2 is the cause of a new disease called COVID-19. The test for SARS-CoV-2 is not for the whole virus, the complete sublight microscopic particle itself. Perhaps most familiar is this computer-generated image we see on the news. The test is supposed to detect a 1% fragment of an RNA molecule, its genome, said to reside inside the virus particle.
1%. 1%. When they tell you that they're sequencing for the whole thing, it's not true.
Based on its detection, a person is deemed infected with the virus SARS-CoV-2 because this tiny fragment is regarded as de facto for 100% of the virus's RNA. It could be seen as finding a horse-like hair as evidence of the horse itself. This is problematic for 3 reasons. First, while there are many papers...
Okay, so go watch that, please. I'm out of time here. I can't do it right now. I will post it in the comments. Now, this is what I wanted to talk about, because this is, I saw this morning, and I was like, wow, that's actually really interesting, because they talked about these long haulers and damage that it's done to tissue. And even the neurological issues that are associated with SARS-CoV-2, including the olfactory bulb, the smelling. So why would you lose your sense of smell? Well, this I had not heard before, although I had said, because I did a whole podcast just on the vaccine and the technology being used for the vaccines, I had said that it's not about recreating the whole virus. It's just about creating the spike protein so that it caps the ACE2 receptors so that theoretically the virus can't get into your cells and begin to replicate, and therefore you don't get the pathology, the disease of COVID, right? And I thought it was interesting that one of my friends, who's looked into this quite a lot too, he didn't see it that way. But I mean, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. What matters is that is what the vaccine is supposed to do. It's just supposed to code for this the spike protein only, though a small part. So when she's talking about the virus, she's talking like these things right here. These spikes are where they bind to the ACE2 receptors. So instead of sending this whole thing in, what they're injecting you with is a lipid capsule, is what they call it, which is it's just a way so that it doesn't dissolve within your blood until it gets to your cells. How it targets specific cells, I have so many questions about this stuff, but it goes into your blood, and theoretically you're being injected with a whole bunch of just like these little things. Okay? And those little things are supposed to bind to the receptors so that there's going to be a competing interest if you get the virus, right? The virus gets into your system. There's the viruses floating around, and then they just want to get into cells and replicate. Now you're made up of trillions of cells. So, I mean, there's two different ways of looking at it. There's what's called germ theory, and then it's called terrain theory. I'm a person that sits in both camps. I believe there are germs, but I believe that terrain theory is the predominant reason why somebody would either fight off a disease or illness, or they would succumb to it. And so I've been saying since the beginning of this thing, we should be looking at what makes particular people susceptible to what's happening right now. And a lot of work has been done to identifying that vitamin D deficiency is a major factor, and that's true for a lot of reasons. But it insulates the cell. It's not like the virus wouldn't get into the cell. It's that when it does, there's not enough bioavailable energy and metabolic energy. I'm sorry if I'm using the wrong word. Again, I'm not a doctor, but I listen to smart people, and I can at least discern what it is that they're trying to explain. Now, I'd love to have the back and forth of being able to ask these questions in live time. So I have to look for the answers myself. It doesn't always work out the way that I want it to. But the point is that this thing is going to get into your cells, and can your cells fight it off internally. Like, it just because it gets into your cell, does that mean it's going to necessarily manifest? Because that's what we're being told. Just being exposed to this means that you might die. Is it true? I mean, yeah, theoretically it's true if you're not well. And that's why so many of these elderly people, when they get it, they're succumbing to it because they simply don't have what is required in order to be able to fight this off in their system. And a lot of that has to do with vitamin D, which is why you see so many people with darker skin succumbing to this in places like New York and I think Sweden, actually. A lot of the people that died were from a lot of the migrants that had led into the country recently. Some of the people that got sick. So, that just has to do with the ability to absorb vitamins, and it also has to do with socioeconomic status. Do you take care of yourself? Are you eating properly? Are you supplementing? All these things matter. So we should be identifying what makes specific people susceptible, and we should be helping those people with their health. Would that not be cheaper than creating this whole gene therapy vaccination program where we have to force it on people? And we have to pay these experts to come out and convince us that it's all necessary. I mean, it's just like, it doesn't make any sense, because it doesn't make any sense. We did not need to change our entire way of life based on this thing. But I will say what this article suggested was actually very interesting. And it plays into the idea of viral load. Viral load is not, it doesn't mean that you're exposed to a little bit of the virus. It means you're exposed to a lot, which would explain why people that come on planes, if you're in that closed loop system and you keep rebreathing these germs that are floating around aerosolized, if you keep breathing them, you get a higher exposure, and then your body doesn't have enough of what it takes to fight it off before it can actually consume your cells and then overwhelm your system. The point is is that none of this makes sense, because it doesn't make sense. What does make sense is that they wanted to stop climate change. That we know, because they've been telling us for years, over and over again, what they think the problem is. Billy Gates says that it's too many people. Right? A lot of these people are obsessed with population growth. What do we do with all the people? And that just means they don't know how to take care of them. Right? Why don't you just admit that the reason that you're so worried about other people is because you don't really have any concrete answers on how to take care of these people that you can sell to them like a vaccine. Instead, you just have to appeal to other things that get them emotionally on board with what you want. You sell them identity politics and victimology. Because at least you can tell them it's not their fault that their life is the way that it is, and it's not their fault that they didn't stand up to their corrupt governments and do something about it, because it's not their fault. But it also isn't the fault of the West and freedom and free people and capitalism as a way of creating prosperity for the entire earth, which it has done. And then on the backside of that, you have the Fourth Industrial Revolution and all the problems that brings along with it, that really, again, are about control. So they're worried about stability for their system and controlling the stability of their system. And so they needed this way to kind of get everybody to agree to a certain set of rules and standards. And this is it. This is it. That's not to say that there couldn't be certain blind spots within that community. And I think that this article details one. And let me just tell you what this article is actually called. It's called, this is on Children's Health Defense. Could spike protein in Moderna, Pfizer vaccines cause blood clots, brain inflammation, and heart attacks? And that's something that Dr. J. Patrick Whalen, a pediatric rheumatologist, warned the FDA in December that mRNA vaccines could cause microvascular injury to the brain, heart, liver, and kidneys in ways not assessed in safety trials, because they weren't designed to find that stuff. They were designed to find, does it reduce symptoms? And that was really one of the only requirements, which is why the whole thing is a farce in and of itself. Does it reduce symptoms in people that are prone to symptoms? That's all they really looked for. Like, that was the whole scope of the trial. And did people die? Like, right away. And we already see, with the rollout of these vaccinations, for people that have done the rudimentary math, as I have done, and people that I know have done, that people that have been taking the vaccine, been getting the vaccine, especially the elderly population that were being told had to be protected at all costs. This was one of the most incredible things. I just could not believe the way that this guy tortured logic. So again, this guy is a guy whose job it is to sell you the fact that these vaccines are good and there could never be anything bad about them. And so you shouldn't be worried. And what did he say? That one's good. Sorry, let me get there. Because this was just unreal. I could not believe this guy's... Oh, you know what? I put it here.
But what we know is alarming. Decisions to...
Okay.
That's away on Wolf Blitzer Report.
And by the way, I wanted to really go through this. I'm gonna have to do way more of these podcasts. I could do this for 3 hours a day, just to be perfectly honest with you. Okay, I could easily do this for 3 hours a day. The reason I don't is because I don't have the time. Right? Kids are always running around the stairs, screaming, yelling. It's too noisy. Like, they're home and they're being quiet now. They have class in about 15 minutes, so I really gotta wrap this up. But I want you to listen to this guy's absolute tortured logic telling you that, and we've again, for people that have done the rudimentary math, the elderly that are in the most susceptible group from poor outcomes, possibly death from SARS, too, supposedly, what we're being told, actually had less chance of dying than the group of people that are getting the vaccines. Like, you measure the amount of people that have gotten the vaccines and then have, like, subsequently died, and apparently that number is just rising all the time. And I'm not trying to make light of it. I'm not laughing at it. It's horrific. It's horrific to watch this happen in real time and watch these people make excuses for it. It's mind-blowing. And so the whole point is that people like me have been saying, hey, we don't need to shut down our entire way of life because of some disease that, you know, unfortunately, if it gets to a person who's at the end of their life, they might die if they get it. Why don't we try to pump them up with vitamin D and give them the stuff we know that works, like hydroxychloroquine, and can help them? But a lot of the people that are dying, like, these people are already at end of life. They're not well. And to suggest that, you know, you take out the people that were probably going to die within the next month or two. And I'm not saying that I want them to die. Please don't mistake what I'm saying. I'm not saying I want everybody to live forever. Okay, man? It just doesn't work that way. It just doesn't work that way. When you get that close to the end of your life, something takes you out. So this guy's going to make the argument that if it's the vaccine, well, it's because they were going to die anyway. So we need to shut down our entire way of life and our economies and all those things, and we need to socially distance, we need to wear masks, all the stuff we need to do. We need to jump through all of these hoops because of the wild messaging coming out of public health that it's just so incoherent, it's unbelievable. And then a guy like this comes out and apologizes for it by saying that, well, these people were going to die anyways. Holy crap! Are you kidding me?
Now back to cross.
It's unreal.
Hear that some people have died immediately after or shortly after getting the vaccine, then people immediately jump to that conclusion. Maybe that the...
I'm not immediately jumping to that conclusion. Here's the conclusion that I am jumping to. Maybe if you didn't give it to them, they would have still just probably, you know, unfortunately something would have got to them, whether it was SARS-CoV-2 or whatever. But did we need to shut down an entire way of life because of it? No! This is ridiculous. This is tortured logic.
The reporter's trying to tell them that, oh, well, it must have been the vaccine that killed them. But actually, that's usually...
That's usually not the case. How many people die from flu every year? We're told. And why is it also the exact same group of people who are in the highest uptake group for vaccines? You know, like, when I went around to these old folks' homes and these retirement homes with my mother over a year ago with my sisters, one of the things they put proudly up in the hall is this. Oh, this is how high our flu shot compliance is. And they want to get it, like, they want to make sure everybody gets it. And some people still refuse it, and that's a problem, because they know that it's definitely good. Who dies the most of the flu every year? Whenever I see that someone dies of the flu, like a kid or whatever, do you know how many times I look at those articles, I look at them, and I go, okay, where is it? Where's the thing that I'm looking for? Because I'm looking for my confirmation bias. But do you know what my confirmation bias tells me? That the people that die from the flu, more often than not, when I look at the story, actually had the flu shot. And what is the conclusion at the end? Well, this just goes to show that everybody should get it. This is insane. The way these people think is insane. It's the most tortured logic in the world, but they've been taught to just like regurgitate this crap and repeat it. And so they just can't help themselves. Because they get paid to do it. This isn't complicated.
Actually not the case. We have to remember that, for example, in Ontario, people who are living in our long-term care homes are in the last few years of their life.
Yes.
And that often about 1 in 3 people living in a long-term care home dies every year.
Yes. Sometimes in
naturally.
clusters.
And so I think the key is that
usually after the flu shots, like, pay
yes,
attention
there are
now.
going to be people who might die within days, but that might have just been because they were close towards the end of their life. It wasn't hastened by the vaccine.
Okay, so this guy's telling you now that it wasn't hastened by the vaccine. They were going to die anyways. But, oh yeah, how can you say that they were just about to die and then they died, sometimes, from the vaccine, and then say, well, it's not because of the vaccine? What? What did you just say? What are they really teaching people in these schools? Does it sound like it's reasonable stuff? No, it's an explanation for the way things are that does not threaten the way that things are. It doesn't threaten the profits. It doesn't threaten the return on investment that these guys have made in order to control the entire system. And do you know who had the kind of money to put up the Georgia Guidestones? Those guys. They did. So, you tell me why everybody's gone crazy. Okay, so yeah, this guy. I mean, he's just like, I'm sure he's a very nice guy, but man, how do you do this tortured logic to say such a thing? It's just unreal. It's unreal. That guy would have been running around saying, we need to do all these things to protect these people from dying and the end of their lives. So, you see, it doesn't matter. It's whatever he's paid to say is what the guy's going to say. And if he were to 1 second, if he were to come out and say something that actually made sense, well, you're fired. He's probably got a lot of payments left on his $2 million home in Toronto or something. Okay, so, yeah. And the only people that are speaking out are the people that are not, they can't be threatened for doing what they're doing. Like a James Lyons Weiler who has his own thing, which is basically just about, it's whatever. It's like a watchdog organization that actually tries to point out a lot of the problems that happen in society. And then he goes out and he writes a book like this. Cures versus Profits, Successes in Translational Research. And this is all about the fact that they make these studies come out the way they want them to, as opposed to actually looking into whether or not what they're doing is beneficial, or really just about making a profit out of something that is actually kind of like, it's not really, the cost versus the benefit analysis is not right. That's why it's called Cures versus Profits. Cures versus Profits. Now, when it comes to Agenda 2030, that's a whole nother ballgame. It's a whole nother layer that most people can't even be bothered to try to think about, I guess. I don't know. But, okay, I really have to get off. I got just a couple minutes. Let me try to get through this. So when this stuff was coming out talking about these long haulers, which I've looked at, like, when you look at the studies about the long haulers, there's some people that actually say some things that sound like, well, that's weird. But that's true of, like, any kind of disease and ailment. Like, right now, I have an issue going on with my knee where there's a super sharp pain. I don't know if it's a bursa or what. But if I touch my knee, it hurts like hell. But nobody made that happen to me, I think. I don't know. Maybe something got in my body. It's possible. But we all have these things that kind of happen to us in our lives. And the cure, or the solution to that, is not to shut down the way that modern society works. Screw the consequences. Well, we just have to do it. And how do you end up in that kind of position? Well, you convince all of your buddies that if you don't do something about it, the world's going to burn up in 10 years. But those people are never right. They haven't... Again, if you have not read Bjorn Lomborg, False Alarm, or Michael Schellenberger, Apocalypse Never, you will not understand that there is another way to look at these things. One that's not so hyperbolic. One that is not climate alarmism and extremism. But you have to look at it. And please, listen to the podcast that was just put up by Jordan Peterson with that fellow that just wrote a book that I probably will get. Talking about the fact that, things aren't as bad as you. Stephen Pinker wrote a book. Things are not as bad as we seem, and we're just inclined to clickbait the more exciting stuff. Oh my gosh, we're all going to die tomorrow. What does this say? Like, it's ridiculous. Yeah, I know. Okay, so, but anyway, I poo-pooed this kind of stuff, and I said, it just sounds weird, and it doesn't make sense to me why that would be the case. But then I read this article this morning, and I said, well, that does actually sound much more plausible. And I will tell you what it says. In October 2020, researchers took a more detailed look at the heart after death from COVID-19 and found that cardiac damage was common, but more from clotting than inflammation, and that microthrombi, small blood clots, were frequent. We did not expect this, said the study co-author Dr. Rumen Vermani of CV Path Institute in Gaithersburg. I'm just destroying this article. Gaithersburg, Maryland. It seems to be unlikely that the direct viral invasion of the heart is playing a major role in making myocardial necrosis and microthrombi. So, what he's saying is that this doesn't make sense in a typical presentation of a viral infection. Right? It doesn't make sense that this is what would be the outcome, because this is not the way a normal virus would affect things. Dr. Hyung Chun, a Yale cardiologist, suggests that the endothelial cells lining the blood vessels potentially release inflammatory cytokines that further exacerbate the body's inflammatory response and lead to the formation of blood clots. Chun has stated the inflamed endothelium likely contributes not only to worsening outcome in COVID-19, but also is considered to be an important factor contributing to the risk of heart attacks and strokes. So we know a lot of people died from heart attacks, but they were also chalked up to be COVID-19, which is why there's all these people that are, they have 2 and 3 comorbidities. They're having these heart attacks, and it had to do with this microblotting or whatever. Microclotting. Great, I'm bleeding. A subsequent study published last month confirmed the findings of the microthrombi resulting in myocyte necrosis, indicative of recent myocardial infarction or heart attack, in 40 individuals who died from COVID-19 infection. The studies also identified microthrombi as a major cause of cardiac injury, neurological complications of COVID. Individuals with COVID-19 experience... Okay, look, I have to get off. Please go read this article. What it talks about is the fact that what they are proposing is happening is that the spike protein is actually breaking off of the virus. You're exposed to the virus, and the spike protein itself is getting into it's passing the blood-brain barrier, and it's causing these clots by getting into blood cells itself. I can't explain that any better, but I would suggest that you read the article, and the thrust of it is that these vaccines that are designed just to simulate the spike protein and creating the spike protein could be exacerbating the problem, which is what leads to the things that we understand as being a potential, what do they call it? There's a word for it, and I can't find it right now, but it's basically we're giving people these vaccines, and they are we're giving people these vaccines, and it's going to lead to this worse outcome the next time they get exposed to the actual natural virus. And that's something that's said by Dolores Cahill, and she went back and reviewed all of the studies talking about when they did these vaccine trials before with ferrets, and I think mice, and even some children. And a lot of people suffered really, really bad outcomes. And they're saying this stuff kind of represents as a kind of... Sorry, I'm being distracted by the noise coming down the stairs. Okay, listen. Please go read it. I have to cut this off. But I need to talk about this. I need to get it more organized. I need more time to do this, basically, because I'm always rushed. Such is life. We got a lot of problems, and I hope that we can find our way past this with rational discourse, because that's what we need. We need rational discourse. And what we don't need is these people exacerbating the problem and straight up lying about what they're doing. I mean, straight up lying about the reasons that they're doing what they're doing. He will never tell you that he 1,000% believes that vaccines are the single greatest thing to ever happen to mankind. But, you know, he's been taught to say that and repeat that. And this one's really good. And it's always these people that say the same things because they have been taught to repeat the same stuff. So, you know, it's not even complicated. It's not complicated. And the question is, are they doing... You think that if people that are directing a public health response to things would do so because they're acting completely transparently. And so that's the issue that I have and a lot of people have, is that the transparency around this thing is being purposely covered up with the tests that are not reliable, with the way that we're telling everybody that the vaccine's going to be the only thing to cure you, and it seems to be there might be some real problems with the vaccine and the technology behind it. And where they plan on taking things in the future, which they're already telling us that most people would not accept if it were just them saying, okay, we have to do this now. They never would have accepted it. Never would have accepted it. They would need to make a pretty strong argument to convince everybody to give up all of their possessions, which is where this is going. So, the year is 2030, you own nothing and you've never been happier, or whatever. So, yeah, it's a lot going on at once, and I understand why people can't grasp it all. But beware, wolf in sheep's clothing. Beware somebody that is telling you they're going to bring you to the promised land. They'll work out the details on the way. Yeah, that's not the kind of person you want to listen to. Anyway, much love. Take care of yourselves. And I'm going to end it there.